And thank you so much for joining us. My name is Christy Mattino. I'll be here with you for the next several hours. Let's start off talking about Iran. A live look there at the Strait of Hormuz this morning. New in from CENTCOM, U.S. forces disabled an oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman at 11:20 p.m. Eastern time yesterday after the vessel violated the blockade against Iran by attempting to transport Iranian oil, marking the third commercial ship disabled by American forces this week. So CENTCOM saying they acted against the oil tanker as it attempted to transport oil from Iran through the Gulf of Oman. A U.S. aircraft fired 2 Hellfire missiles into the ship's engine room after the crew repeatedly failed to comply with the directions from U.S. forces. CENTCOM forces have disabled 9 non-compliant vessels, redirected 135 ships that complied, and allowed 42 vessels supporting humanitarian aid to pass since initiating the blockade on April 13th. Also wanting to share this here with you, these are some posts coming from Fox News. All of this comes as the U.S. and Iran traded strikes for a second day. So this American attack, which lasted into this morning in Iran, appeared more intense and wider than the day before. But Tehran released little information on the extent of the damage. An Indian official said a U.S. attack on an oil tanker allegedly trying to violate Washington's blockade on Iranian ports killed 3 Indian mariners. It was the third time this week that back-and-forth strikes have rattled the Middle East. The first involved attacks between Iran and Israel, followed by the 2 rounds of fire between the U.S. and Iran, which hit countries in the region that host American bases. I want to bring in Dr. Ramesh Sepehrad. She's the chair of the advisory board for the Organization of Iranian-American Communities. Thank you so much for taking the time this morning to speak with us. We really appreciate it. A lot going on here.
That's correct. There's a lot going on. Thank you, Christy. It's good to be with you.
Okay, well, let's start with this. The U.S. says it disabled a third commercial ship this week for allegedly violating its blockade on Iran, as I read before I brought you in. What message is the U.S. trying to send by taking direct action against commercial vessels it says are violating the blockade?
You know, what's really clear in here is that the Iranian regime in recent days has escalated, and the Iranian regime is trying to hide something. The real message that we have to look at is or the real question, I should say, that we have to look at is what is the regime hiding? In the last few days, there has been escalation of protests. There were student protests across more than 23 cities in Iran. Regime is trying to hide that fact. Regime is trying to hide its fight with the Iranian people, its real war with the Iranian people. So for us to really understand what is the dynamics in the region and how regime is behaving, we have to look at it from that lens and from that perspective.
Absolutely. And the U.S. and Iran, they've now exchanged strikes for a second straight day. This U.S. attack that we just saw was described as more intense and widespread than the previous one. How concerned should people be that this might grow into a larger regional conflict? Some may say it already is a larger regional conflict at this point, but in terms of escalation.
The Iranian regime is weak. As I said, the Iranian regime is facing conflicts on all fronts, but I think the main conflict that it's facing is the war that it has with the people of Iran. That's why, as the regional conflict, it tries to latch onto the regional conflict as a way to distract the message that's coming from Iran, which is the people of Iran want to end this regime. It's trying to escalate the execution of political prisoners. And I think the protest message itself, when people are saying we're going to be in the streets until we gain our rights and until we overthrow this regime, should be our flag and our signal to really focus on that. Regional conflict can happen, escalation can happen, but we have to think about the political endgame. And the political endgame should be an Iranian regime change. This is a message that's going to be heard in Paris on June 20th. More than 100,000 Iranian diaspora are coming together in support of Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan for that very reason, to present the political endgame to this house of terror and house of chaos in Tehran that is trying to escalate the conflict in the region and is trying to hide its weakness at home.
Now, efforts to negotiate an end to this fighting appear to be stalled. What are some of those biggest obstacles standing in the way of a diplomatic resolution? Because we also saw President Trump, as he shared to Truth Social yesterday, saying they're taking too long to reach a deal and they're going to have to pay, essentially. So what are those obstacles getting in the way?
The obstacle is Iranian regime sees its strategy of survival in gaining a nuclear weapon. The obstacle are the fact that we don't have a reliable partner at the table to negotiate to reach a diplomatic resolution. The obstacle are we dealing with the terrorist regime that believes in regional hegemony, that believes in nuclear power and the terror abroad as well as oppression at home. The obstacle is the Iranian regime that the solution for that obstacle, the solution for that is in the hand of the Iranian people, their opposition, the organized opposition. And I think one of the messages that Iranian people hear is from the U.S. Congress, which is on more than one occasion, there has been a bipartisan support for their rights to overthrow this regime and for their rights to self-defense and self-determination. This is where we need to have a policy pivot in order to support the peaceful, democratic Iran and a peaceful region in the Middle East.
Now, just continuing to touch on this, it feels like we've seen a back and forth here. We're getting close to a deal. We're backtracking, getting close to a deal. I also just referenced that Truth Social post from President Trump yesterday. I'm just going to share it on the screen here. President Trump has warned that Iran will pay the price for these stalled negotiations. A two-part question for you here. What exactly do you think that means? And is President Trump really done trying to negotiate? Is that what this is signaling?
You know, whether the negotiation is going to change the dynamics from a U.S. policy perspective or not, the fact is the party, the conflict party on the other side, meaning the Iranian regime, is not sincere. In my opinion, the U.S. should not give Tehran a lifeline while Tehran is giving Iranian people the executions and the oppression. If we place human rights at the center of negotiations, at the center of any diplomatic engagement, that's when we're going to see the real weakness of the Iranian people. Our first condition should be stop executions. Our first condition should be give access to free internet and without surveillance by the regime. Then we're going to see the real message coming from inside Iran, which is the message of Iranian people to change this regime.
I also want to share this post that was actually just up on the screen here because Fox News' Trey Yingst has been speaking directly with President Trump. And there's just a key piece in here that I want to read. The administration believes Iran is continuing to drag its feet at the negotiating table, even as U.S. forces demonstrate overwhelming military leverage. What is Iran's tactic here?
Iran's tactic is to buy time. Iran's tactic is to create distraction. Iran's tactic is to really try to latch on to its last moment in power, because you have to remember the regime is weak. There is no real cohesive leadership within this regime. IRGC is running the country. IRGC is a terrorist organization. There's a ton of infighting happening inside the country between the factions within the regime. So the weakness is external, is it internal to this regime? So I think when you look at real path for diplomacy or real path for change, that path runs through the message of Iranian people, which is the Iranian regime change. We have to change this regime in order to really land.
First, Steny Hoyer endorsed Adrian Boafo to succeed him in Congress. Then Maryland's teachers. Next, Governor Wes Moore and Senator Angela Also Brooks. Trusted leaders, one clear choice. Democrat Adrian Boafo for Congress.
Once again, a live look this morning, courtesy of Marine Traffic. I think there are some people that are confused about whether the Strait of Hormuz might actually be closed. And once again, we had that news this morning that U.S. forces disabled an oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman. Can you just explain for our viewers who might be confused, where does the Strait of Hormuz stand as of right now?
I think the regime is trying to leverage Strait of Hormuz as a key factor in its positioning with the U.S. and the global market. But Iran really is the one who announced that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. But we know that, global market is adjusting to that. And I think we need to make sure that the survival model that this regime is trying to establish, which is by taking Strait of Hormuz as a hostage, by taking paths for repression, escalated executions and aggression in a region, we have to continuously think about how do we dislodge this regime from these leverages and make sure that it cannot change the dynamics of what's ahead. So from my perspective, the Strait of Hormuz should not be controlled by the Iranian regime. And I think the United States is doing everything it can in order to dislodge the regime from its full control of the Hormuz so that the global market can continue to adjust to this situation.
Just a couple more key points before we wrap up here. This conflict also so heavily tied to concerns about Iran's nuclear program. How do you think that is going to play out here? Really, how central is that to getting to a deal, and who's going to maybe have to compromise?
As I said, the regime in Tehran is looking at nuclear program, nuclear strategy as a way of survival. And the real compromise is not the question here. The real solution is the political end game. We have to think about, in a long term, how do we want to deal with a regime that stands on terror, stands on nuclear aggression, stands on the regional conflict? And the answer to that is an Iranian regime change. A regime change that can bring a non-nuclear secular republic is the answer. And that's what we need to get behind. And I think, as I mentioned, that's what the bipartisan majority House resolution also supported on multiple occasions across the last 5 Congresses. So I think that is the path forward.
Just to conclude here, the U.S. and Iran trading strikes again for a second day, as we've been saying. President Trump issuing that warning to Truth Social just yesterday as well. What should people be watching for here in the coming days, maybe weeks, as this continues to unfold?
I think this is a moment that requires a moral clarity and a strategic discipline. I think the pressure on the Iranian regime should continue. We have to block the notorious IRGC resources. We have to stand with the people of Iran. The future of Iran will not be decided by any foreign bombs or backroom deals or negotiation. It should be decided by the people of Iran. And that's why you saw the student protest in the last few days. That's why we see political prisoners resistant against this regime and sending messages out talking about how they stand for a free secular republic of Iran. And that's why you see the growing support for Maryam Rajabi's 10-point plan. And you're going to see that again in more than 100,000 people coming together on June 20th in Paris. That is the event to be watched.
All right, Dr. Ramesh Sepehrad, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox this morning. I'm sure we'll have you back as a lot continues to unfold here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.